Have you ever heard of a venture capitalist who tells someone, like, straight up not to take their money?
Really?
Yeah, it sounds crazy, right? But that's exactly what this guy, David Hornick,
Okay.
did. He's a big name in Silicon Valley, and he was all set to invest in this company.
You okay?
It was started by Danny Shader. He was already a successful entrepreneur, and you'd think Hornick would want to, like lock that deal down ASAP.
Yeah, in that world, you'd expect the pressure, the limited time offers.
Exactly. But instead, he encourages Shader to shop around, even gave him references. It's like he's trying to help his competition, you know what I mean?
Wow.
And that whole approach is like the perfect example of what we're diving into today, Adam Grant's give and take. It's this like fascinating look at why this whole giving thing, even in business, is not just some nice idea. It can actually lead to like serious success.
And that's what's so interesting about Grant's research, right? He really breaks down these different approaches to like reciprocity, how we give and take professionally, and how that can actually like determine who sinks and who swims, you know?
Totally.
He says we all tend to fall into these different styles, these approaches, givers, takers, and matchers.
Okay, so let's break that down for our listener a bit. What exactly makes someone a quote-unquote giver in this context? Is it just like being, super nice all the time?
Well, it's more about your default approach, right?
Yeah.
So a taker is really focused on what they can get, always trying to come out on top, even if it means, stepping on some toes along the way.
Right.
Givers, on the other hand, they genuinely want to contribute, to add value for other people. They focus on what others need, and often that comes without any strings attached.
Okay, so then you've got the matchers kind of in the
Yeah.
middle,
Yeah.
right? Keeping things balanced.
Exactly, exactly. Matchers, it's all about fairness. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, that kind of thing.
Makes sense.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Grant found that givers, they're overrepresented at both ends of the success spectrum.
Hmm.
Like you find them at the very bottom and the very top.
Now that is really interesting. How can the same, like, basic style lead to such wildly different outcomes?
It comes down to strategy or sometimes the lack thereof. Givers at the bottom, they often overextend themselves.
Oh, yeah.
They're constantly saying yes until they're just drowning in obligations, neglecting their own work to help everyone out.
Well, I've been there. It's like they're always the bridesmaid, never the bride.
Yeah.
Always helping others reach their goals.
Yeah. Yeah, precisely. But then you have the givers at the top, and they've kind of cracked the code. They figured out how to leverage that giving nature to everyone's advantage, including their own.
Okay, so spill the tea. What are those top-tier givers doing differently?
Well, think back to David Hornick, right? He didn't just throw money at a problem. He built a relationship. It was about trust, about genuine support. That's a powerful foundation.
Yeah, I mean, in a world where everyone's just trying to get ahead, that kind of trust, that's priceless.
Absolutely. And Grant is this great example. It's, believe it or not, engineers and salespeople.
Oh, yeah, I remember this one.
Yeah.
He found that the least successful in both of those professions, they actually had high giver scores.
Right.
They're bending over backward, but not in a way that was actually helping anyone, least of all themselves.
Exactly. Exactly. But here's the thing. The highest performers in both those fields, also givers. So it all comes down to being a strategic giver.
Okay.
It's not about being a pushover. It's about being smart, knowing how to help, who to help, and protecting yourself in the process.
All right, so we need a master class in strategic giving then.
Huh.
And who better to learn from than one of the most renowned givers in history, Abraham Lincoln.
Now, that might surprise you. Lincoln, the guy who, navigated a civil war, not exactly who you think of when you think, giver.
Right, but he was actually known for his strong giver style, although back then he was considered too honest for politics.
Yeah.
People questioned his ambition because of it.
Interesting.
Like, Grant digs into some really specific examples in the book about how Lincoln would hesitate to, defend clients he knew were guilty, even if it could help his career.
Wow.
Or that time he stepped aside in the Senate race because he believed another candidate had a better shot at defeating slavery.
These are big moves, risky moves. He was putting his own ambitions on the line.
Right. So how did this giver approach ultimately lead him to become, well, Abraham Lincoln?
That's the million-dollar question, and that's where we'll pick up in the next part. It's like Lincoln got it, He understood that focusing on the greater good, even when it meant making these huge personal sacrifices, well, it often led to some unexpected benefits down the line.
So it wasn't just, blind faith.
Yeah.
He understood that giving could actually be its own reward in a way.
Yeah. Now, you might be thinking, what does any of this have to do with, me? How can our listeners actually put this into practice, in their own lives?
Well,
Well, let's talk about networks.
okay.
Something Lincoln was like a master of. Grant, he introduces this idea of dormant ties.
Dormant ties. So
So
cool.
these are like relationships that you've built but you haven't really engaged with in a while? Think old colleagues or classmates you haven't seen in years.
Oh, yeah. We all have those. The people you're like, oh, yeah, we should totally grab coffee, but then life just, like, gets in the way.
Exactly. Now imagine, being able to tap into that network, not out of the blue, but from this place of like genuine pre-existing connection.
Right.
Givers are so well positioned to do that because they've already laid the groundwork, right? They've been helpful, they've built trust, even if it was like way back when.
So it's like they've got a head start in the relationship department. They're not starting from scratch every time.
Exactly. And here's where it gets really relevant for like today. In the age of LinkedIn, Facebook, all that, it's easier than ever to rekindle those dormant ties.
You know, it's so funny you should mention that. I was literally just scrolling through LinkedIn the other day, and I saw this post from a former colleague, and she had helped me out, like, big time early in my career.
Yeah.
And I had this urge to just reach out, to reconnect. And I hadn't even thought about this whole, like, dormant ties concept yet.
See? It's like this natural inclination to reconnect, to like reestablish that goodwill that givers often have.
Right.
And those connections, they can turn into incredible opportunities.
Yeah.
Grant actually uses this guy, Adam Rifkin, as an example. Have you ever heard of him?
Oh, yeah. He's like the networking king of Silicon Valley, right?
That's the one. And he attributes like a lot of his success to this really simple concept, the 5-minute favor.
The 5-minute favor. Okay, I'm intrigued.
The idea is, to just be open to helping anyone who asks as long as it takes 5 minutes or less of your time.
Okay, that sounds like almost too easy.
Yeah.
How can doing these small favors turn into like such a massive network?
Well, it's not just about the favors themselves. It's the ripple effect they create. When you're consistently helpful without like expecting anything in return, you
Yeah.
build this incredible amount of goodwill. People want to return the favor, not just to you, but to others as well.
Oh, so it's like paying it forward, but like on a whole other level.
Yeah, exactly. It's a much, I think, more profound form of reciprocity than just like, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. It's about creating a whole culture of giving within your network.
I love that. But, let's be real. This all sounds great in theory, but does it actually work in like the real world? Don't givers run the risk of just getting taken advantage of, especially in today's, kind of cutthroat professional landscape?
Yeah, no, you're bringing up a super important point. Being
Yeah.
a giver, it doesn't mean being a doormat.
Right.
Grant definitely acknowledges there are risks, right? Some people out there, they will try to exploit that generosity,
For sure.
but there are ways to mitigate that risk.
Okay, so how do you become a successful giver without getting like walked all over?
Well, it comes down to a few key things. First, set boundaries. You don't have to say yes to every request.
Right?
Be strategic about like who you help and how much you give. And remember, sometimes saying no is actually a form of self-care.
Yeah.
It's about making sure you have the resources to continue helping those who really, truly need it.
So it's about being like discerning with your generosity, not just like yes, yes, yes to every request that comes your way.
Exactly, exactly. And here's the interesting thing. Giving itself can actually protect you against those takers.
Oh, okay.
Think about it, right? When you have this reputation for being, generous, helpful, who do you think people are going to turn to when they need help?
To you, the reliable giver.
Exactly. And they'll do it with like enthusiasm, not just out of obligation, because they know you're not keeping score, that you're genuinely invested in helping them succeed.
So it's almost like all those acts of giving are like, investing in a network of goodwill ambassadors.
Yeah, exactly. They become a part of your network, and they're more likely to not only help you when you need it, but they'll vouch for you to others, further building that positive reputation.
Okay, that is a really powerful incentive to like embrace that giver mentality for sure.
It really is. And it's something that's, I think, become even more critical now in the age of like online transparency, right?
Yeah.
Think about it. Back in the day, someone like, Ken Lay, the Enron CEO,
Yeah,
he could get away with that unethical behavior for much longer.
totally.
Because information traveled so much slower back then.
Right. It was a lot harder to connect the dots and see that pattern of like bad behavior.
Exactly. Now, with social media, online reviews, Glassdoor,
Oh my gosh, yeah,
it's so much harder to hide those taking tendencies, you know?
totally.
Your reputation, it precedes you in a way that it never has
It's
before.
like the internet has become this giant, like, karmic scorecard.
In a way, yeah, it really has.
Yeah,
And it's not even just about, avoiding these major scandals. Even those small acts of taking can have, like, lasting impact.
totally.
One bad review online can stay there for years and really harm your business, your career.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
I will be honest, I am someone who checks online reviews for, like, everything. Trying a new restaurant,
Yeah.
booking a hotel, online review.
Exactly. And it's not just, customers, potential employers, colleagues, even investors. They're all using these platforms to gather information.
Yeah.
So every 5-minute favor, every act of genuine giving, it's not just about being nice, it's about building this positive online reputation that can like benefit you for years to come.
Okay, this is making me rethink, like, my whole approach to networking. So if I'm hearing you correctly, it's not just about, like, collecting business cards at events.
Right.
It's about figuring out how I can genuinely be of service
Yeah.
to the people I'm, meeting.
Yeah, you got it. And that's where Grant's research, it gets really tactical. He provides all these practical strategies for like navigating this whole world of give and take,
Okay, good, because I need those.
which we'll dive into in the next part.
So last time we were talking about strategic giving, right? How to be generous without, like, turning into a pushover, especially in, today's world where everything's connected. It's about building that reputation that's both, real and beneficial. But how do you actually do that? Where do you even start?
Yeah, that's where Grant gets really interesting. He makes it clear that like successful givers, they're not just these like selfless saints, right? It's
Right.
not about, ditching your own goals, your own ambitions. They're just as driven as anybody else.
Okay.
They've just figured out how to make that giving work for them, not against them.
So it's like finding that sweet spot, right?
Yeah.
Where generosity and self-interest, they actually line up.
Exactly. And
Right.
one of the keys is like really being mindful of who you're giving to. Grant talks about this thing, right? It's like this tendency for givers to get pulled into helping takers.
Oh, yeah.
Those people who are always looking for what they can get, often without, giving anything back.
Ugh. Yeah, the takers. Energy vampires, I think, is the technical term.
Right. And it's almost like givers are, I don't know, drawn to helping those people.
Yeah.
Because you see that potential, the good that could be there. But you got to recognize, right, not everyone deserves your time, your energy.
Right.
Doesn't matter how much you want to help.
Okay, so red flags. How do we spot these takers in the wild?
Remember those like leaking clues we talked about before?
Yeah.
The small things that give away someone's like real motivation. Bragging about achievements, but never acknowledging, the people who helped along the way.
Right.
Or always using I instead of we, right?
Oh, yeah.
When they're describing successes. Those can be like subtle signs that someone might be more interested in the taking than the giving.
That's so helpful. I'm definitely going to be, like, way more aware of those cues moving forward. So it's
And
about being choosy. Yeah. Not just giving, like, blindly to anyone who asks.
Exactly. And it's not just about, avoiding the takers. It's about seeking out other givers.
Right.
Build a network of people who share that same value, that generosity, that like back and forth.
Right.
Because when givers connect with other givers, it's like this upward spiral of success.
It's true. It's like surrounding yourself with, a good influence. Like that whole, your vibe attracts your tribe. If you're around givers, you're going to attract more givers, and then
Sure.
everybody wins.
That's it. It creates this culture of like abundance. Yeah.
Where people, they're excited to share ideas, to help each other out, to celebrate wins. And that is powerful.
It really, really is. So as we kind of wrap up our deep dive here, let's bring it all back to our listener. We've talked about these 3 reciprocity styles: the givers, the takers, the matchers. And we've seen how givers, they might struggle sometimes, but they can achieve amazing things, right? By being smart about their giving.
100%. It's about those real relationships, tapping into your network, even those dormant ties, and practicing that, 5-minute favor.
The 5-minute favor. I love it.
And realizing that today, everything's out in the open, right?
Right.
Your reputation online, it matters just as much as offline.
Oh, for sure.
Giving can be like the smartest investment you make. It's true. So for our listener, the one who's been with us this whole time, here's something to think about. As you're navigating your own work, your own life, how can you embrace that giver mindset in a way that feels real, that feels authentic to you. Maybe the next time you go to a networking event, it's not about grabbing a million business cards. It's about making those real connections, seeing how you can, be of service. Or maybe it's finally reaching out to that old friend, that old colleague, waking up that dormant tie and just lending a hand. Because the truth is, giving has a ripple effect. It comes back around, often in ways you would never expect.